pounding you to death with an enormous document to plow through. Okay, so we made it through steps 1 and 2. We did our articles of incorporation, we had our organizational meeting, and now step 3. Step 3 is the first shareholders meeting. Alright? This is the first time that the shareholders are going to get together and do what shareholders do at a meeting. Specifically, they elect directors. The board of directors is elected by the shareholders. Shareholders get together and this is what they do. They vote for directors. So that's sort of their whole function. That's their main purpose, is to elect a board of directors. So what we'll see later on when we get to talking about this a little more is it creates sort of an interesting dynamic between directors and shareholders because of the power that directors have to give shareholders what they really want. And if you own any shares of stock in any companies, if any of you out there have invested and bought shares of stock, you know that what you really want is a return on your investment. And we'll see how largely whether or not there is a return on their investment is controlled by the directors. So directors are elected by the shareholders, and they are also removed by the shareholders. And that's usually what the main purpose of an annual meeting is, to get together to get sort of the financial reports on how the corporation has done over the last year, and to have an election for directors. Okay, having gone through that, one other thing on this, by the way, before we move on, and of course, if you don't have directors because you've been using incorporators through the incorporation process, well, now you elect directors and those incorporators can go away, because now you, after the first shareholders meeting, you have an official board of directors who are chosen by the shareholders and are vested with all the power that they need to take action on behalf of the corporation and to do what the corporation needs to have done. So that's the formation process. Once you get to that point and you have everything you need filed with the state, you have your bylaws in place, and you have your shareholders meeting and you have a board of directors seated, you're good to go. Okay, so let's talk about issue 2, right? We went through issue 1, which is formation, and our 5-question sort of exploration. Issue 2 is management. How is a company is the company managed? In this case, the corporation. How is a corporation managed? Where's the management power? Well, here's where those cast of characters sort of come up. We got shareholders, directors, and officers, and already you see how I'm kind of talking about all 3 at once, because the beauty of the corporation is sort of the interaction between all 3 of these characters, these groups of characters, and what they do and how they sort of check and balance one another. So they're important stuff, but we've got shareholders, directors, and officers, and if you'll forgive me, with apologies, shareholders, directors, and officers. Oh my. That's a Wizard of Oz reference, for those of you who don't know. So let's talk about shareholders first. All right, we need to talk about what they do, and specifically now we're going to talk about what is their management power within the corporation. Well, first of all, they don't have any management power. And as you know, when we talk about management power, we're talking about the ability to decide the day-to-day operation and function of the company. When we talked about sole proprietorships, we said that the sole proprietor is 100% in control of his sole proprietorship. He has all the management power when it comes to deciding things like what price they're going to charge for their product, what kind of marketing they're going to do, whether or not they're going to take loans, whether or not they're going to change direction and start, instead of making product A, they're going to make product B, or both, whether they're going to expand, whether they're going to contract. You know, the sole proprietor makes all those decisions. When it comes to a corporation, the shareholder does not make those decisions at all. Those decisions get made somewhere else. We'll talk about where. All right, so what does the shareholder do? All right, well, they do have some decision-making power. All right, they don't do nothing. First of all, we've already talked about it. They have the ability to elect and remove directors. All right, that's an important thing that they do, because as we'll see in a minute, and I think I already mentioned, directors are the ones who have the decision-making power, the management power in a corporation. So shareholders get to choose who those people are. So that's the first thing that they do, and that's an important function. Second of all, they approve what I call fundamental changes to the corporation. I forgot to close this quotation mark over here. Forgive me. Do that right now. There you go. They approve the fundamental changes to the corporation. So some examples of what we mean by that, because that's sort of a loaded term. A fundamental change could be something like a merger or an acquisition. The company's going to decide to merge with another company. This happens all the time. You can't do something like that except by vote of the shareholders. Same thing with acquisition. Acquisition is different from a merger because you're not combining two companies. Now it's just one company swallowing the other one. Usually it's a very large company purchasing a very small company. Microsoft made a lot of business out of this when they were at their peak in the 1990s, buying a lot of smaller software companies, either because they wanted to utilize some piece of software that this smaller company had generated and designed and sell it under the Microsoft label, or because they just wanted to eliminate their competition. So mergers and acquisitions, that sort of thing. Asset sales is also another type of fundamental change to the corporation. Basically what it means is the corporation is dumping assets. It's a way of contracting the company without folding up altogether and ceasing business. So something like, should we close this factory over there, like some of the car companies were doing earlier in the last decade, or should we relocate this factory from Detroit to Mexico? That's not an asset sale. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is, do we need to take our net worth, the net worth of our corporation, and reduce it by dumping assets, by selling, by liquidating a portion of the company? That's an asset sale. And as you would imagine, like I said, what are shareholders interested in? They're interested in their bottom line. They want return on their investment. And if the company is giving, I don't want to say giving away because that's not accurate, but if they're selling their assets and reducing their overall value, that is going to impact stock price. So the shareholders generally don't like to do asset sales. But then again, if you're a director or an officer of a corporation, you don't want to see your company contracting either. You want to see it growing and expanding and increasing profitability. But there's probably a really good reason why at this point you want to do an asset sale. And if you can convince the shareholders that it's a good idea for the long-term future of the corporation, maybe they will approve it. But a harder thing to do. But if in the event that it's being done, it's considered a fundamental change and you need shareholder vote. Another thing they'll vote for is flat-out dissolution. Right? When the corporation folds up and ceases doing business, if it does so voluntarily, that is going to require a vote of the shareholders. Now, one of the interesting things about corporations, and one of the advantages to having a corporation, is that they're designed to operate perpetually. In other words, they are designed to live forever. Forever and ever and ever and ever. And there are some very, very old corporations. General Electric is a good example. General Electric has been around for a long time. I think it's close to 200 years now that they've been around. It's getting there. I'd have to look it up to be sure. But I know that they've been around for a really long time. And so they are a really old corporation. All the people who founded GE and all the original shareholders are probably dead. Matter of fact, I'd be willing to bet that they're all dead because it was started so long ago. But the company didn't go away when they did. Think about how that differs from a sole proprietorship. Obviously, when the sole proprietor dies, so does the sole proprietorship. Partners. You can't have the partnership anymore if the partners are dead and gone. When the partners are gone, so is the partnership. Corporation is not its owners. The owners are not the corporation. So the corporation is designed to live beyond the life of its owners. It is a separate entity in and of itself. It has a separate lifespan. It's kind of a crazy concept, but that's the way it's designed. Anyway, in the event that the company decides it wants to dissolve and fold up, that will require a vote of the shareholders before they can do that. Okay, so that's shareholders, and that's what they do. Let's talk about directors. All right, we've already mentioned that the board of directors is where all the management power rests. All right, they are the entity that has the power to make the day-to-day decisions for the corporation on what it's going to be doing, how it's going to be doing it. They're vested with that power from the outset. All right. However, the problem with the board of directors is that they can only make decisions as a board. One director alone has no power. You need to take action as a board. All right. This can be a problem, and here's why. How many of you have ever sat with a group of friends and tried to decide what you want to get on a pizza? It's hard to get consensus. It's hard to get everybody going in the same direction and take action. And if you're a shareholder in a corporation and you have one particular viewpoint, there's always going to be some shareholders with the opposing viewpoint. So you might be able to get one one director's ear and say, this is what I think we ought to be doing. But there's always going to be somebody, who wants to do something differently. So getting consensus is hard. Another example of that is, have you ever gone with a bunch of friends, even though this Blockbuster video is completely obsolete now? I'm surprised it exists at all because Netflix is just blowing them out of the water. But if you've ever, back in the day, gone to a Blockbuster with a group of friends and tried to decide what movie to rent, I can remember going there with, my wife, and between the two of us, it was a miracle if we could get out of there without, getting a divorce, because we could never figure out between the two of us what movie we wanted to rent. It's hard to make decisions in a group. It's a very difficult thing to do, and especially when they're a group like a board of directors who've just sort of been thrown together by the shareholders. There's no guarantee that these people are trained to work together as a team, or have any experience in that regard, or even want to, or if they're there for some other agenda that they have. So, complicated stuff, and it makes the board of directors, operate really slowly. You also have to wait until the board of directors meets, and the bylaws is going to say when they meet, how often, for how long, and blah 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 blah. So you have to wait until they get together as a board before they can do anything, which also makes the process very slow. So, in order to avoid that, a lot of corporations will hire officers